My name is Andrew Toy. I'm a product management director within the Android and Chrome team. And today I'm going to talk to you about Google and Google. Basically, how do we manage devices and security and secure access within Google itself? So when I'm talking about Google, I mean Google as in Googlers, our own employees, access to our own data, our own code. If you were to come and work at Google, how do you get a device and things like that? We're not talking about necessarily our products, though we do use our own products as part of this. So our own IT department, our own IT sec department. Quick poll, I know people don't really love this, but just put up your hands if you work in IT. All right, a lot of IT folks. And maybe a subset of that, but if you're in the security part, like CISO office or SecOps or anything like that. Okay, so a handful of security people, so going there. And one last hands up if your company and you're responsible for working with your own MDM or EMM or UEM solutions from that regard. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. That just helps me calibrate a little bit what we're talking about today. So why device management matters. Since a lot of you are from an IT audience, you guys understand why device management matters, right? I work a lot with our own Corp Eng department, and obviously we need control, we need access. We can't just let data flow willy-nilly. We need to know where our data is being accessed from, how it's being accessed. It's about security, it's about management, it's about control. Today, everything I talk about is our general principles of how we manage our endpoints. So yes, I come from the sort of phone and tablet side, but we're including laptops in there because what we're seeing is that while laptops and desktops have been around for much longer, and there's always been ways to update and fix them, with patching and with things like Big Fix and images and flashing, what we're seeing is that the modern way of doing management, which is through a set of management APIs, through strict data separation, through security by default, through rigorous app stores for app deployment, that's the way we see endpoint management going across all endpoints, all the way through certainly mobile and tablets and through laptops and desktops, but even all the way through to IoT and Internet of Things. So this isn't the IoT talk. I also cover that. I'm happy to answer questions about that if folks have them. So why do we really need this? Well, a lot of things have changed in the last few years. Like since the upcoming advent of mobile, a lot of new groups have sprung up, a lot of new technologies, a lot of new vendors have come to us and said, hey, we do device management and this is how you go. A lot of your EMM or MDM will be coming to you and saying, well, I used to do just mobile, but I want to do your laptops, I want to do all your endpoints as we move to a UEM, Unified Endpoint Management world. So all of this won't be new to you folks. We're trying to manage a lot of this complexity and say, how do we have a principle that overrides and runs through all of our various endpoints, so we're not solving things in an individual way. And something I always said is that mobile is not its own thing. Mobile was its own thing for the last few years. We have mobile groups spinning up, we have mobile application developers, mobile device management vendors, but really mobile is kind of like what internet was in the early 2000s, right? In the early 2000s, late 90s, the internet was very new. A lot of companies said, well, we need an internet division and an internet group, and I'm going to have an internet part of my company, an internet set of people who work on that stuff. But what happened was everything is internet, right? Internet is interwoven into the fabric of all of our companies. And that's the same thing about mobile. Mobile is more just about the proliferation of devices, the proliferation of access, the proliferation of networks onto cellular networks, right? Which breaks down the old models of how we used to do things in IT. So one of the reasons I give this talk, and I was introducing myself as a product director, I ran Android for Work, which is part of the initiative to bring Android into the enterprise. But I also ran mobile application security and development at Morgan Stanley for over 5 years. So I've sat on both sides of this, and so I think very carefully about what it's like to be within an organization and trying to manage this complexity and saying what I would do if I were you folks in the modern world. So how do I do things at Google, and why is it a little bit different? First of all, we definitely have an open culture, and this open culture means that we tend to lean towards failing open. That means that we don't have this idea of, okay, well, I have my walls, I have my buildings, I have my intranet, I'm going to go ahead and lock into that and manage everything through those gardens. Are people familiar, who here is familiar with our Beyond Corp initiative and has read some of those papers? Okay, Great. What I would recommend for everybody is that you familiarize yourself beyond corp. C-O-R-P is what you'll want to Google and look around for materials. I think we have a link at the end of the deck for it as well. Beyond corp is something that I would absolutely familiarize yourself with if I was working in IT today, which is Google's VPN-less, intranet-less way of approaching how we deploy applications. Yes, we are cloud-centric. Yes, we are cloud-native. We have a ton of advantages, but the principles apply to every company, which is really the idea of being secure and safe and managed because you're on your intranet, those days are rapidly going behind, right? That's an old model. It's reaching the end of its lifetime is what we believe. So here at Google, we actually do have an intranet. We have Google-A, for example, for our Wi-Fi, which is an intranet, and we have Google Guest. But I will say that on my laptop, I can't remember the last time I needed to be on my intranet to access anything special, right? I can be on, oftentimes if I'm like, oh, I got a little bit of a problem on Google-A, I'll just jump over to Google Guest and keep it right on working. I don't refire up a VPN, I don't do anything, I just keep on going, right? I can bring my laptop from the internet, pick it up, take it home. There's once again, no VPN, nothing. All the security is done through HTTP, through certs. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But the idea is that's the experience we're trying to give to Googlers. It's not, well, where am I, and what network am I on, and how do I access things? We try to make all of that go away so people can just get their work done immediately. So we fail to this idea of really good user experiences and are willing to really push the boundaries of moving past the traditional comfort zones of IT to make sure that when people are able to work in this way, of course, security is paramount to us, but we are up for doing the extra engineering we need to make sure we have security and we have access. So just talking about that, we're very aware, right? We're Google, we have Gmail, we are, when people look at like how people are getting hacked and stuff about phishing, we take security extremely, extremely, extremely seriously. This is a theme of Next, and hopefully all of you guys are getting it. We are very aware that professionals are being targeted. I come from Morgan Stanley. I know from financial services, very high-value targets for phishing, for social engineering, for people trying to get in with malware. Very aware of all of these targets. So security throughout this talk is absolutely paramount to everything that we do. Right? We have a group internally for analysts, for detection, for response, for prevention on all of our endpoints. So when I tell you something like, hey, we don't need to have an intranet, it's not because we're just taking and throwing security to the wind. It's because we have a new way of approaching these problems. And by the way, I'll have room for questions at the end where you'll be able to ask them. But if you want to just stick up your hand at any point, I'm happy to take questions throughout the presentation. So this is Urs. You might have heard him speak again. Urs runs our technical infrastructure team, and he also owns the IT and internal corporate engineering department, which we refer to as Corp Eng. And I think, often say this, and when I worked in IT, we would say this all the time, but I want to refocus everyone in the room because I think this is something we want to keep in front of our minds. IT and security is an enabler. Right? It should not be something that restricts what you can do. Security is what enables you to do stuff, right? So in your personal lives, when you pay with something with your credit card, you are aware that this feels like a generally secure way to pay, right? Like even though there is credit card fraud out there, you're not dealing with fraud on like a day-to-day basis and like, oh my God, I can't pay at this restaurant because they might steal my credit card number. Hopefully you're not, right? And because you have that sense of security and because of all that work that has gone into the security of payments, you feel very comfortable using your credit card in a lot of different scenarios, right? So that's the kind of feeling you want to have as you work through and as your users want to have, is that they know they're secure, so they get this freedom and this liberation to actually do more. Too often, security ends up just being a gate or a blocker. No offense to the security people in the room, but oftentimes, when we talk to customers, we talk to the IT side, they say, oh, well, we'll have to get this through our security department. And what we try to say is, let's try and get to a relationship where security and IT are collaborating to say, how do we explore the art of the possible while still keeping it absolutely secure? So these are kind of the three dimensions of what we really feel. On the one hand, there's security, IT security, information security. You may have the same department who does both of those things. It might be a different department who does InfoSec from SecOps. Definitely, there's usability, and I talked about that. I think we all intuitively know what usability is. And there's also privacy. And this is a really important part of the puzzle as well, because if you share all of your information all of the time and you actually surrender all of your privacy as an individual, it actually makes the security person's job a lot easier, to be honest, right? But that's not necessarily what employees want to do, and that's something we need to take into account as well, right? Even though we all have the big terms of services that can flash up and say, you have no expectation of privacy, we can access all your information while you're on net. Yes, of course, the company can do all those things. The company shouldn't necessarily do all those things unless it really has to. So these are the three pillars that we think about: security, usability, and privacy. And while we recognize that it's always a little bit of a push and a pull in each direction, part of the art and the science here is finding a way to find the right blend of all those things so that you can have a wonderful access strategy internally, one that you're excited about. So this is part of what we were going to go here. I worked on mobile in the sort of pure BlackBerry days, right? Like the days when it was like, well, that's it. BlackBerry did a great job solving this problem. We're going to deploy BlackBerries. It's going to be BlackBerry through and through. We're going to run the Bez server. We're going to just give out BlackBerries. All good, right? And that was, on the one hand, liberating, because this was a mobile strategy for the first time that IT could take and say, well, we agree, this is secure, this is great, let's deploy it, let's give mobile access to all of these, the employees who've never had it. On the other hand, it was semi-constraining, right? Because what actually was happening was all of this strategy, which strategy was being deferred to effectively one company, RIM, right? Research in Motion, who makes BlackBerry. And so when you do that, basically you're outsourcing your strategy to a vendor in that case. You're like, my strategy is BlackBerry, which is kind of a strategy, but actually what you're saying is my strategy is BlackBerry's strategy, and they go hand in hand. And what happened is that, great, yes to everything BlackBerry, no to everything else. And that was fine because BlackBerry really was a very good device. When the iPhone came around, that kind of blew up that model a lot, right? You couldn't really go to the business stakeholders and say, oh, well, you know what, it's just BlackBerry, BlackBerry. Some people still can. I know of customers who are still in that world even today, right? But most companies have now moved to a world where they're like, well, listen, this is not the way we can run our strategy anymore. We have to be able to at least do iOS. And a lot of companies just say, you know what, for BYOD, we want to support iOS and flavors of Android. This is how we want to run our strategy. So really, you need to embrace mobility and embrace access and feel comfortable that you are covered in all regards, and not just say, this is my strategy, is to restrict the devices and that's it. Because even if you can find a good middle ground today and say, you know what, it's not just BlackBerry, it's BlackBerry and iPhone, technology keeps on rolling forward, right? There'll soon be another killer device, another killer platform, another way of approaching it. How are you going to do IoT sensors? How are you going to do ML when people want to access data from their assistant units, which are sitting in their Google homes? Technology keeps pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing us to be able to have more access for our company in more esoteric places all the time. I would not say that the answer is not to just sort of say, well, it's this, then it's this plus this, then it's this plus this plus this. You want a strategy that embraces and allows you to approach everything at once. So how do we think about access control? We break everything down and we say, well, first of all, let's make sure we have a really good idea of how we think of our people. This is going to be your identity strategy, your IAM strategy. Devices, which is endpoints and the state of those endpoints and how they're managed and what data is going to those endpoints. And this is the one that people often overlook, even though it's the most important, probably should be the most obvious one. Applications. How do we think of and categorize our various applications so we can decide what's appropriate to access at any given time and where? So, on device management, we actually centralized all of these concepts so that we are able to control and have knobs to say, this is what can be accessed from where on which state of device. So again, we move away from the monolithic concept of on-net, off-net, on VPN, off VPN, on mobile, off mobile. Too many of those variables makes it impossible to solve the equation. What we instead said is, let's identify general security and access postures, tiers. We call it tiered access. I have a slide on it coming up. How do we generalize it into those categories? How do we know which applications go into which category? And then let's just define in any given moment in time which state a given endpoint and user combination is in, and are they in a good enough state that we're willing to give access to a given application. It's actually pretty simple when I describe it that way, but that's just a general mantra that we go through. So on the people level, we want to make sure that a given identity has access to the right application. So this is fairly simple stuff, but you got to make sure that you actually have this deployed properly in your environment, which is maybe you're in HR, and so you should therefore be able to say, okay, well, I should be able to see the actual employee records of a whole bunch of different people. I should be able to go in and log into that application and see those employee records. Okay, fantastic. Maybe you should only see it for your department. Maybe you shouldn't see it for the entire organization. Maybe if you're not in HR, you shouldn't be able to see those records unless you're the manager of those people. Most of your companies should have these concepts already in place. I'm just making sure that we have it for the sake of completeness. But for HR, you might have those in place, but you might not have those in other applications, right? The idea is for HR, you're like, well, that makes total sense. We should do it. For payroll, well, yeah, I'm going to do it there. That makes total sense, right? But you got to go through your population of applications and make sure that for each application, you have an idea of who should be able to access it and when. On the devices standpoint, so we did all that for our internal applications. On the devices standpoint, here at Google, just because people ask these questions, we support a variety of different devices. We support Android, and on Android, we support our Pixel devices and any Nexus device at the highest tier of access. We also support Chrome OS at the highest tier of access, and we support Mac OS and Windows at our highest tier of access. So we actually support our entire population. When a Googler comes in, you might think that every Googler gets an Android device, but you'll see that a lot of Googlers are actually carrying around iOS devices. And I'll explain what their experience is like versus an Android device. You'll see a lot of Googlers carrying Mac devices. Fewer carrying Windows, but they have those as well. Lots of us carry Chrome. Actually, it's a completely individual decision by every Googler which device they want to get. You can just go to the internal portal and say, this is the device I want. If you want, when your hardware refresh cycle is up, you can say, you know what, I've been on Mac OS, I want to go to Chrome OS for a while. And you can absolutely do that. All of these platforms are supported at the highest tier. We have the most amount of trust in these particular platforms. From an application standpoint, we use a variety of applications. Obviously, we are a G Suite customer, a very, very big G Suite customer, and we have all those applications. And then we have, and this is kind of interesting, we do not have generically named applications, like they probably do have names on the other side, but we have the usual third-party applications, which we also have access to, and we build across all of those using our Google identity. So I don't know if people are on G Suite, but if you're on G Suite, you'll know that you can center your entire identity on that Google identity. When you log into various cloud services, you can say log in with your Google identity. We completely centralize around that, and that allows us to taxonomize which applications we can get access to at any given time. So how do we bring these concepts together and sort of set the access? So I mentioned this before, and this is like a really key point, right? Tiered access. This is one of those areas where having more granular settings actually allows you to have much more flexibility in actually how you grant access to certain things. So I've often had a conversation with C-level folks from very big corporations who just sort of say to me, Android, yes or no? You know, secure or not secure, right? Should I allow access or not allow access? And we're like, you know, or they'll say BYOD, yes or no? Secure or not secure? Should I allow access or not allow access? And it's kind of an awkward question to answer, right? Because it shouldn't be this binary, secure or not secure, right? Like there's one of the answers, and I'm the Android guy, right? Is like I said, listen, I think BYOD is secure. And I can show you how to make it secure. They're like, got it, boom, secure. And I'm like, wait, hold on. Before you tick the secure box, I will say that I personally would be extremely uncomfortable if your military generals are carrying around nuclear codes on their BYOD phone, right? Really uncomfortable. I don't think you should give out nuclear codes to BYOD devices. Then they're like, got it, insecure. And I'm like, okay, no, all right? Like please don't think about it in this way, right? It's just not, it can't be these two boxes because it depends on what kind of data you're carrying, right? So while most companies hopefully do not have nuclear codes, there are those crown jewel pieces of data that you might want to have. So it would be, even though you treat BYOD as secure, it would be not unreasonable for you to give out dedicated corporate tablets to your board, so that for board of director meetings, you can give the most privileged information to the board of directors without having to worry about and solve a bunch of BYOD concerns. And that doesn't mean you don't do BYOD. It just means you have to have a nuanced, granular strategy to and approach. So we do tiered access. The way that tiered access works is that we classify the internal services. Like I said, that means that we declare what's in the crown jewel category, the nuclear codes. We categorize what's, you know what, we probably need to know that you're a Googler, and we need to know that in general that you're in good standing and all those kinds of things. And once we have that, that's good enough. And we also need to categorize, we're just fine with this. Like just access the data, and it totally makes sense. So we have. Also, in order for this to work, we have to know what state your devices are in. We have to know to help us do security. And we also, and this is implied, but I'm going to talk about it specifically here, need to centralize access. So while we don't have the VPN, we do have something, and Beyond Corp once again talked about exactly what we do here. We do centralize all the access to our services. So I'm going to just skip over this for now and talk about the centralization. In the centralization, we have access control engines and trust inferers that sit between the endpoints and access to all of our applications. Now remember, we are cloud native. We completely admit that this is one of our biggest strengths, is that since everything sits in the cloud, there's a limited number of protocols. In fact, almost everything flows over HTTP and HTTPS, right? So we're able to limit access to our services by having a limited number of protocols and a limited number of ports and all this kind of good stuff. So while we don't have a traditional intranet, extranet service, what we've done is move that concept into the application layer. So our actual HTTP and proxies and our actual servers are able to be aware of the state of a device before granting that access over to a particular service on the back end. And the services are themselves also aware of the endpoint accessing them. So we're not saying, we have to issue you a private IP in order for this to actually work. It's not a network level concept. This is what, and the same exact proxies are used to access services no matter which network I'm on. The only thing that changes is the level of trust changes, because we're able to analyze when I'm on a Starbucks network, yes, that is a different security posture than when I'm on my home network, which is a different security posture than when I'm on my intranet. That is definitely true, but we don't use a on-net, off-net model to try and define the access model from that point. So we do have this. If you look at, we actually launched a publicly available version of this, which is called our gateway product, which was launching here at Next. It's coming into beta and trusted tester, and it's something where we make this proxy technology available to other customers. Combined with the actual proxy here, the gatekeeper, what we actually use is a trust engine, an access control engine, which is saying, all right, so I have everything funneled through now. It's all going through my proxies. It's protecting my services. I know how secure my service is. So what do I want to do in terms of actually granting access or not granting access? And in this case, here are a few examples of what we do. We actually are always collecting data. And we collect this data using our own internal EMM. So we actually use the G Suite EMM to do it, plus some tools that we developed and scripts we developed. So this is collecting logs, endpoint status, reporting on what's going on the endpoint, reporting what applications are on the endpoint, seeing whether we think there's any known malware there. Lots and lots and lots of data, which is being collected from our endpoints at all times, and actually saying, okay, what is the level of trust we put on this particular device? And therefore, in real time, we can adjust the security posturing of those particular devices. So if today we suddenly find out, hey, you know what? There's a newly discovered class of malware running on our Windows laptops, for example. We didn't know about it yesterday. We know about it today. We can actually, instead of saying, well, we will go and say, let's go and scan and let's flash and remove malware and make sure we do that in the fleet. But to make sure we have immediate protection, we can say, let's change the trust engine to say that if we know that this particular application is installed on a Windows machine, no longer allow access from that Windows machine to our most secure technology. Right? So therefore, because that's actually in our cloud and not on the endpoint who's determining the access, we are able to move them down. And that user can probably still get email, they can still do their regular work, but they might not be able to access, the crown jewels at that point until they're remediated. And then once they're remediated, they can get access again to everything else. So we collect all of this data, and we're able to crunch it. We use machine learning. We have a security analyst team. We have a lot of different teams. You can imagine what we're doing there to make sure that everything is working. So tiers of access. Let's sort of get down to some brass tacks. There's actually another tier here called untrusted, but we're getting rid of that. So there's minimally trusted, mostly trusted, and fully trusted, right? Very easy language to use. You can map this. You can take it, use it in your own company. You can map it to something. Minimally trusted is basic access, and what we mean by that is stuff where you're like, okay, you need to do your job, and to be really honest, if someone who's not a Googler looked at this stuff, it's not really the end of the world, right? So. But it's not just the most basic stuff, but it's just stuff where we don't really try and care too much. Definitely stuff like our bus schedules would be in there, right? Our menu and cafeteria access is in there. That's in there. But interestingly, and a lot of customers find this interesting, we actually put email in that category as well, because we find email to be existential to the way that for someone to actually get their job done. And so we want them to be able to get their job done in a lot of different places. So emails, doc sheets, and slides are actually all in the minimally trusted category. So if you bring in BYOD today to Google, you can bring in any BYOD phone, and you can get your email on that phone. Right? I know a lot of you probably have like an approach where you can't do that. You can do that. We trust that. We trust the Gmail suite of applications. We trust G Suite and the inherent security built into the cloud to keep all of that stuff safe. Mostly trusted is normal access, and what we mean by that is okay, we're going to have a stronger position around exactly what your identity is. We're going to have a better idea about the state your device is in, and you should get access to most applications to get your job done if you're sitting in mostly trusted. You shouldn't have to go all the way to fully trusted in order to get your job done. Because I know people are probably already thinking, oh, okay, well, that must mean that fully trusted is the best tier. We just put everything into fully trusted, and then just, boom, I'm done. But if you do that, once again, you don't really have a tiered strategy, right? What you, once again, have is a binary strategy where you're either fully or you're not fully. And if you're not fully, then you're just a straight-up second-class citizen. That's not our approach. Our approach is, if we're doing a good job, you should be able to do the vast majority of your job day-to-day sitting in a mostly trusted tier. And you should be able to do most of your job sitting in a minimally trusted tier, a good amount of your job in a minimally trusted tier. But certain things you might have to go to fully trusted on. So, as an example, when I go home, I need to have two-factor authentication to get into mostly trusted, right? But I can take my two-factor authentication and I can use it with my home computer. That's my computer that I own, and so it's not imaged, it's not flashed, it's not anything like that. It also doesn't give up a lot of logs or anything back to Google. I can put my two-factor token in, I can get into that middle mostly trusted state, and I can do the vast majority of my job on that particular computer when I work from home. So, again, very simple examples. Cafe menu, probably totally fine to be in that lower tier. There's not a lot you're going to do with that, right? But I'm not going to be able to go and check even my own payroll status from that particular device. And I'm not going to be able to go and check in code, download code, certainly not push to production machines. Again, that middle tier, where I'm able to do sort of most of my job. And remember, I'm not an engineer, so when I say most of my job, I don't need to code for a living because it's one product. But tighter controls there, and we have applications that sit in that category. So now I can access more private, more secure information where really it being me is important. Remember, now it requires two-factor in order to get in there. So, okay, wonderful. Shorter-lived access tokens, shorter-lived identity tokens, requires two-factor to get in there. But now if you do all those things, you're able to go in and check payroll and do. I can approve expense reports and those kind of things in that category. And finally, the last tier, again, based on your business, all these things will apply. For us, our crown jewels, we're Google. Our crown jewels is our code and our cloud and our production base, right? So we do require you to be on a fully trusted, fully interrogated machine in order to be able to access that data and to do those things here at Google. So, how are we actually doing this on laptops? I refer to mobile a little bit. This is kind of the world a lot of people are sitting in right now. And we do this as well, right? Like we do this for older OSs. We have the virus, we have antivirus, we have our own images for Mac OS, we have our own images for Windows. We're also constantly upgrading those. We're going to Patch Tuesday stuff for Windows. We issue the patches. We do everything that your companies are probably doing to make sure that that fleet stays up to date. If you're not doing those things, you should probably be doing those things on any of your operating systems. So we do go through this, but we don't love this world, right? We don't think this is the modern way for people to live. Again, it feels constraining. It feels like busy work that needs to be done just for the sake of security, not really enabling anything good. So what we did is for both Chrome and Android, and here I will give the example using Chrome OS. Chrome OS is actually fully trusted out of the box. Windows is not fully trusted out of the box, right? I cannot go and get a off-the-shelf Windows laptop, bring it in and say, yeah, this is a Google laptop, and then bring it into fully trusted. It has to run our Windows image. Mac OS has to run our Mac image. Chrome OS does not run a special Google image. It uses the consumer image, right? This is why I'm giving this example out of the box. Same thing for Android. Do not have its own image for Android. Runs the consumer image, yet can get into fully trusted. It can get into that highest tier of security for us, right? Again, I'm just reiterating to set your intuition. Windows laptop at home, using it at home, great. You can get into minimally for sure, maybe even to mostly. But to get into fully, you're gonna always have to have an image running from Google. In this particular case, Chrome, that's not the case. And that's because Chrome and Android and iOS, right, like are running in a more modern way of doing operating systems. And Chrome in this case has verified boot, TPMs, encryption out of the box, sandboxing of the actual processes, and all of these things. So verified boot, for example, we feel comfortable because we know that the Chrome image is always signed. It has tamper protection. It has tamper resistance. And so we know it is always using a Google signed from the manufacturer firmware image on that particular device. And we have the same thing on Android now as well. So you might not know this, but on Android, if someone wants to flash a custom ROM, etc., you can absolutely detect that through your EMM and either prevent it, or you can say, well, if someone's has a custom ROM, no fully trusted access, which is what we do at Google, right? So you have to be using the manufacturer ROM and the manufacturer OS. We leverage the TPM on Chrome OS for storing secure keys. So if we're going to give a long-lasting identity token, so this is something we try and do in fully trusted, is you don't want to be logging in over and over and over and over again for security purposes. So we need a way to give long-lasting identity and long-lasting OAuth tokens and identity tokens out to these particular devices. So by using the TPM as the root of trust, we're able to actually do that with higher confidence rather than having really important tokens sitting in somewhere on disk where they can be extracted and used by an attacker. Right? So that's an important thing, is to have an appropriate root of trust. Processor sandboxing. Processes sandboxing. So inherently, everything's running its own process. Those processes are protected against each other. So if you have a piece of malware, it's very difficult for it to attack another process. It's difficult for it to extract data from another directory. All of this is built again from the ground up by default in modern operating systems. There's a point there that some of you may not understand, which is we actually also have the Play Store and Android applications now running on Chrome OS, and that is also running in a separate process, which is isolated from the main kernel, so that we can actually make sure that we have high amounts of security from any Android app being downloaded. Does not interfere with any of the security on the Chrome OS side. And of course, updates, right? And this is a really painful thing, a lot of investment going into here. But on Chrome OS, 0% IT effort is spent into managing updates, managing patches, managing like figuring out what's going on, doing all those things. We use the exact same over-the-air, every 6-week automatic update process that a regular Chrome OS consumer user would use. Right, because everything is baked into that cycle. We don't here, but just speaking for how you can manage Chrome OS, it has a full set of EMM controls that you can use with it. You can delay those updates, because sometimes you want to do verification checking and testing and stuff like that. But because of the nature of Chrome OS, because everything is really running through the browser, because of we're once again cloud native, our need to actually go and say, oh, let me test all my applications is almost zero, because we don't have that legacy application burden that we do on other platforms. So The benefits of this approach is that it's greatly simplified for IT. We know that we're secure by default, so we're able to grant that high tier of access to Chrome OS and to Android just out of the box, right? And it has a wonderful employee experience because you can just get up and running and not have to worry about anything. So I'll give you an example of what I did yesterday. You might have noticed that we're presenting from a lot of Chrome OS devices here at Next. But what happened was I needed to present from my laptop, not this presentation, but at a different one somewhere else. And so what actually happened was I was like, well, I have it all set up on my laptop, and I could get access to it here, and it's a privileged document that I want to present, a privileged site that I needed to get to. So instead of saying, well, how do I unplug this laptop and plug everything in and get it all working on the screen and everything like that, all I had to do was go to that device, and I just said, log in as a new user. I've never logged into this device before, never, right? I just said, log in as a new user, log in as Andrew. It's already a privileged device. I put in my security key. I logged in. I got all access to everything immediately from my own drive and my own docs and everything, pulled up the site I needed, pulled up the site, great, did my presentation, then logged out, said destroy the session, and everything is removed from the Chrome device, right? Nothing completely secure, but I can use any Chrome device in the Google fleet, and within, I'm just saying, within a minute, I had that absolutely set up to be me, just the way I want it, with all of my access, all of my privileges, everything I need. So that's what we mean by enhanced employee experience. And we don't force people to use Chrome. It's a choice that people can make. They can get a Mac, they can get a Windows device, but there's some nice advantages of using Chrome. So this is another example, Chrome Grab and Go. This is what I just said, but in the form of sometimes I leave my laptop at home because I'm absent-minded, and this happens actually quite a lot. So as long as I carry my security key, what I can do is we just have these massive banks of Chromebooks that just sit in every building. And if you forget your laptop, you can just go, grab a generic one, no IT interference, you don't even talk to IT, you don't even file a ticket, you just grab it, they're all getting power right there, you stick in your security key, you set it up for yourself just the way I just said, you just log in basically with your credential, you use it all day, and because I'm a Chrome OS user, it feels exactly the same as using my own laptop, right? I use it for the day, at the end of the when I'm done with it, I just stick it back in there, and I just put the power back in, and it says, okay, great, thanks for returning your Chromebook, and I go home. That's it. Right? So it's completely self-service, it's completely secure. I mean, we didn't make it secure. It's literally just the same as my own laptop. The only reason I have my own laptop is because I just like the idea of ownership, I guess. But really, from actually getting my job done standpoint, there's no difference, literally no difference between me using my own laptop and using one of these loaners, other than the fact that I like the idea that I have my own laptop. So, how do you take this? We're going to have plenty of room for questions at the end. I can take this anywhere you want. So how do we actually plug this in? Building a phased approach. So you definitely want to start slowly and start looking. You don't want to just revolutionize and change your entire thing and say we're going to be on Corp all at once. But you want to say, how do you build the best experience for your users? How do you make sure that you've identified the users who need access to things, gone through your applications, taxonomized your applications, made sure you know what people are accessing, and get all of that stuff under control? You want to have a dedicated team working with your devices. I mean, I'm guessing most of you probably do because you're in this session. You're probably part of this team. But you do want to have people who are thinking about this every day, because if they're not, once again, you're not going to have a strategy. You're just going to have tactics, right? So you want to have a strategy for your organization that's right for you. We think that the concepts I've talked about today, again, they're high level, but they apply to 95% of companies. But that doesn't mean you can just take them and immediately do them. You do need to make sure you do the work to adapt them to your own company's needs. So you need a team who's working on that. So in this particular case, you do need to make sure that your security model also transcends everything. Again, where we are is not somewhere you can get to in one step. We were cloud native from the very start. We had a shared security model from the very start. We had a shared identity model. We have a lot of advantages here at Google. We recognize this, but you want to get to the point where your security team and your IT team are on the same page in terms of all of this kind of stuff and what's going to be necessary for a given application on any given endpoint. And within Google, debate rages because we have the right tool set with the tiered access, but there's huge debate and huge threads which say, you know what, is it safe to give this exact application access now? It's always been in fully but maybe now we can get away with it in mostly because we have new signal from mostly devices that allow us to feel more confident. And then, security and IT will debate and talk and collaborate for months, and then we're like, you know what, let's give it a try, and we'll move its access and we'll give it to it on a different tier, and we'll try. So this is a live strategy, right? What I've talked about today is more of a framework for how you get there, but putting the right service in the right tier is really important. Because once again, otherwise the temptation is just put it all in fully, don't trust anything else, and you've gone back to the binary days, and you're not going to get any benefit from this strategy. Here, what you'll be able to do, because you do this, is once again deploy services much more quickly than you've been able to before. When you're worried about malware and all these kinds of things, you actually greatly reduces, and I gave that example before for a reason, it's actually very confidence boosting to know that if you see any threat, no matter what the threat is, you can make adjustments in your cloud policy to make sure that your surface area for attack is greatly reduced without having to worry about your endpoint fleet. Because you always have that issue where you're like, well, what percentage of my fleet is patched? What percentage is running this malware? Can we reduce that? Well, this person's traveling, so we can adjust this. What you want to do is say, great, all those things are just facts of life. But what you can actually do is we can deploy the services and put the security and control in the cloud. And by doing that, we don't have to worry so much about the actual end state posture because we know we're still protected. Yes, that individual user might lose some access to some services for a while, but that's appropriate and generally unavoidable. You definitely have to make good hardware choices. So just because, like I said before, this is not about BYOD safe or no. And people have come to me because I'm an Android guy, and they're like, Samsung, safe or no? How safe compared to LG? And I'm like, listen, there's information that can be shared amongst all of these various things. And I'll tell you exactly where, and if you are curious, now we can talk about exactly where we've ranked various devices here at Google. But what we say is there's a role for every device in your actual, when you have tiered access, there's a role for probably pretty much every device. Because even if they have very low levels of trust, you can give access to some services. It shouldn't be all or nothing. And the more services you can get comfortable with in that basic tier, I think the better off you're going to be. But still, for those higher tier stuff, you want to make the right hardware choices about which platforms you support. So ultimately, this is all moving towards tiered, right? Give yourself and arm yourself with this framework and the tools you need, so your job is just making really clever, insightful decisions about where your risk profile is and where you're comfortable taking the risk, not with what I see all the time is people just being constrained by that example I gave before, right? BYOD, safe or not safe. If you're even thinking about it in those terms, it means you've tied your own hands in your ability to solve this problem, and you will be forced to deploy an imperfect solution to the problem, just by definition. You just don't have the tools you need to actually solve it, right? It's a hard enough question when you have the tools you need, right? Because we debate all the time about what should be on a BYOD device versus not, but if you just have one big lever for access and not access, you've already crippled yourself in this standpoint. So there's a lot of nuance behind all of this, and I don't want to necessarily say this is a one-stop shop. This is like a 1-hour session that you're all hearing about this, and this is years of thought that we put into it. We publish white papers that you can read about it. You can talk to your cloud reps to hear more about how we do it here at Google. We have whole things where our IT department is able to share our learnings, etc. This is not just a boom, we've solved it, easy, buy this product, you're all done. That's not what I'm here to tell you. What I'm here to tell you is it is relatively straightforward, though, to go and talk about within your company and say, what's our overarching strategy to endpoint access? Do we have the strategy we need to take us forward for the next few years where device proliferation is just going to be off the charts, right? Off the charts. Now is the time to be ready for all the various devices and access points that you're going to have coming forward as everything moves into the cloud and as we just proliferate devices to every single part of the workplace. And I have a whole connected workspaces discussion that I give, which is not for today, but where I talk about where we see that proliferation of devices going and coming from. So for you, there's a few links here. I apologize for the relatively difficult links to type in, but you can take a look. Definitely Google around, look at Beyond Corp, look at some of our best practice advisories, read more about tiered access, and these are areas that you can do to familiarize yourself more, further reading, further homework to see how you adapt this to your own organization. And we as Google are obviously here to help you as well, because I will say that there's two things when I joined Google that really blew my mind. I'm like, Google just does so much better. I've been here for 3 years now, right? And I've been in enterprise mobility and security forever. But there's two products which, honestly, as Andrew, I'm like, blew my mind about how good they are here at Google, where I'm like, every company needs to be like this. One was video conferencing. This has nothing to do with this talk, but I'm just giving you one of them. Video conferencing is really good at Google. Like every single meeting has video conferencing. Every single meeting is just good. If you come in via VC, totally part of the culture. Takes like 3 seconds to set up a video conference. Even ad hoc one-on-ones. I'm like, hey, do you want to meet? Sure, let's meet. Let's do a VC. It takes me 3 seconds to set that up, right? Amazingly good at Google. Like blows my mind. And the second area is the approach to endpoint security and access. I've never seen such a focus on security because it's Google, and also such a focus on giving as much access all the time to our employees and saying, no, more. How can we step up our security story so we can give more to people on lower tiers of access while still remaining protected? That is just built into the culture. And what that means as a Googler is that you feel like you can just focus on getting your job done, right? Never does my devices and access really feel like it's getting in my way. It just feels like I'm always able to just get stuff done, which is really my job. I really honestly, not just because I work here, feel like those are really tremendous things that Google has done very, very well.